I will be 92 in December, so bear with me. I have to start maybe from where I was born.
Okay.
Up until 1939, we were in Soviet Union because my father married my mother in Soviet Union. I was born in Kiev, my older brother born in Kiev also. The story begins with Poland was split between Germany and Soviet Union in 1939. Germans attacked Poland from the west. When they were halfway through Poland, advancing, Soviet Union took advantage and jumped from the east, and within 2 weeks or few days later, they were already occupied part of Ukraine, where my family lived. Operation Barbarossa, they called. Everything was fine until May of 1942. Somewhere, I would say, beginning of 42, Germans started to build side track, railroad track, in a village across approximately 3 kilometers from our village. And they levied surrounding villages for labor, horses and manual labor. And this levy came through village mayor. In other words, he's the one who decided who will furnish what to work on that railroad. People who had more land and didn't have the resources, they were levied less than people who didn't have land and had manual labor, so they had to furnish manual labor. And it was normal to go there on designated day and work on railroads until the end of the day and come home. One day, my father and I, with approximately 40 other people that worked there, were put on a flat car, which also was not unusual because many times they took us to different sites along the railroad in one direction or the other to work on railroad. So we boarding this railroad car, flat car. They took us to city of Rovno. They took us from railroad car, marched us into old Polish barracks. When we were taken in 42 to those barracks, they were surrounded with barbed wire, double fence with concertina wire in between, heavily guarded by German guards. And they took us into the barracks grounds, took us to delousing facility, where we were deloused first. From there, they took us through processing, and I was a little over 15 years of age at that time, or so, less than 16 anyway. First time ever been away from home. First time in situation as I was subjected to, and I was confused, I was scared, didn't know what to expect. I lost track of time. I don't know how long we were kept there. However, one day they marched maybe 600 to 800 people into that little railroad station. They were railroad cars, freight train railroad cars, box cars they call them. They put us in these railroad cars and took us to Germany. We were on the road a little more than a week. Arrived in city of Würzburg on the Main River. It was on the south side of Main River, and they had big circus tents put up there. And straw was laid out in rows in this big circus tent where we slept, in clothes that we wear when we left home. And every day Germans would come and pick out whatever number of people they needed. looked in mouth, looked in the ears, the eyes, felt how strong you were. And they took how many people they needed. And we were the last 23 people that left there. Nobody wanted us.
And why didn't they want you?
Well, I don't know. I didn't ask them.
Were you skinny?
Yes, very skinny. However, I think I was more fortunate than anybody else who went before us, because the factory who took us was in part of Würzburg called Heidigsfeld, outside of central city limits. And it was Firma Robert Unkel, the name of it. The factory was declared as a war essential industry, and as such, it was under control of German government. We, as a forced labor, whether we would have worked anywhere else or war essential facility, we would have been always under control of federal government, German federal government. Arbeitsamt, they call it, labor office. And the owners, by the way, were private individuals, but it was under government control. And they were producing processed lard in factory where we housed, and on the grounds of the factory. And in 25 kilogram boxes. We were treated better there and had better living conditions than we had at home, really. And as such, I was crying my heart out because I missed my family, and I knew how good we had, and I knew how bad they had.
But you're with your father, and so you're thinking
Yeah,
of your mother.
I was with my father, yeah. I used to go off behind the building, and I would sit there and cry. Anyway, one day, my father, by the way, was driving truck with a German overseer, so that my father would not escape, and show him the way to go. And he was driving long distance from factory. I was on other truck with a German driver by the name of Zink, Kasper Zink. He was 67 years of age at that time, always smoked pipe. In winter, you could see nicotine running down the windows on the inside from his smoke. And I was only helping load and unload that truck.
And so you're 16 at this time?
Yeah. And the truck was equipped with a wood burning fuel generator. It was a kettle, like shape of water heater, hanging on the side of a truck behind the cab, with a lid on the top where it was secured with multiple screws to keep it sealed. And now and then you had to throw pieces of wood inside. That wood was not burning hot, but was sort of glowing, like charmic.
Throw heat.
Yeah, to generate the gas. Once in a while, gas would build up on the inside, especially when truck was not running. And when pressure built up to certain level, the flapper valve on the inside would pop open, and flame was shooting out of that orifice where the air should actually go in when the engine runs. Well, and that's where fire started in garage. Kasper Zink takes me to our barracks at the end of work at 6 o'clock, locked the gate behind me, went home. At 9 o'clock in the evening, someone in where we lived, walking to the end of the hallway, he saw a flame in the yard. the entire garage was on fire, and that lard that was melting was flowing in yard, burning, inferno. And there was no one there to fight that fire. So all of us 23 broke down the gate, ran there and tried to contain the fire. And then 20 minutes or so, fire trucks from surrounding villages or towns came, eventually put out fire. Shortly before fire was put out, bombers came around, dropped a couple of bombs that fell way up on the hill, where right now there's super highway up there now. There was no damage anywhere. Nevertheless, next day, uniformed Gestapo came to factory, and they had chair. They didn't bring chair. They got chair from the office, I think, put against the regular chair with our arms. We had to lay down on that chair, and each of us got 3 lashes. Now, the whip they used was dried out, flexible male organ of an ox, about this length. And when they hit you one time, you know you've been hit. Well, everybody got 3 lashes. I got 3 also, but they singled me out because, according to them, I set the fire to the garage. They took me to Gestapo in the city of Würzburg, beat the heck out of me, asking me only why I did set the fire for. Didn't ask me if I knew anything about it. At the end of the day, they brought me back to the factory. The Fräulein Fluschutz, secretary of the factory owner, she was secretary of Robert Tunkel. She doctored me a few days. She used whatever she used, but it did help. And I had scabs for a long time, and every time I peel off one, it would start bleeding again. And nevertheless, I healed, and when I was in shape, one day Fräulein Fluschutz calls me to the office and tells me that they were ordered by labor office to deliver me to certain designated location. She didn't say where, a certain date. And my father was not there, he was out on the road. When he came back at the end of the day, I told him about it. So he and I both went to the office, and my father told Fräulein Fluschutz that if I had to go, he would want to go with me because I was the only one left from the family. And by the way, we had no communication with family back home. We were allowed to send only one postcard, only to tell that we were fine back home. And in 1989, when I went to Ukraine, no one remembers ever getting anything from us. So when we left home, they didn't know if we were dead or alive.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Fräulein Fluschutz apparently contacted Arbeitsamt, the labor office. They said, yeah, they can both go. And 23rd of September, 1943, I remember very clearly. So the fire in factory must have been somewhere beginning or shortly before September, because it took me a while to heal. On 23rd of September, they taken me and my father to railroad station. Apparently that was the designated spot they wanted us to be delivered. And there were other people there, maybe 50 altogether. we were put in a boxcar in the afternoon, fairly late in the afternoon, train took off, and they told us, I don't even know where I heard, but I heard from someone, maybe from the guards or someone from our people, that the train was going to Ruhr province of Germany. From railroad car, we were marched to a mess hall. In mess hall, we were issued coveralls, and we were told that next day we would go to work in coal mine. And they told us not to put any underwear on, only coveralls. And as we were in mess hall, there were sort of a platform-like stage, maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet high off the floor. They fed us a soup. Now the soup was made of grape peelings, where they're making wine and squeeze the grape. That was the peeling of the grape, and it floating little tiny white worms with yellow heads. That was protein, we were told. Yeah. And apparently that was fermented, because to take breath of air from that soup, it chokes you. Yeah. But that was the soup that we got.
So you ate it?
Yeah, so we had to. That's the only thing they had. And then they marched us into the barrack, and they told us to take an empty bunk, and they told us that, before we were taken to the barrack, a trustee came out on the stage, and he introduced himself as the representative of the camp commandant, supervisor. And he started to tell us do and don'ts. And he started out that we are there because of our misdeeds somewhere else. That's the reason we were there. And he says that, and then another trustee brings 4 invalids who had missing limbs, arms, legs, and brought up on stage. And then this representative keeps on talking. He said, if you think that you try to escape this place, forget about it. He said, these people try to injure themselves thinking they will be sent home when they are no longer capable to work. And he said, you forget about it, because they are not going anywhere, as you can see. And if you do this to yourself, you're going to be just one of them. And you're going to be here until the war is over. Until Germany wins the war, he said. Yeah. And then they took us to the barracks. It was Friday, and he told us processing will take place on Monday. Administrative processing. On Saturday, we went down in coal mine. We were told that it was the deepest coal mine in Ruhr province. And I heard that coal mine was near city of Moers. However, I was trying to find out what mine it was, and I still to this day don't know. We went to work in coal mine. The hard labor inmates were lowered into coal mine first, followed by the miners. And there were German miners, Polish miners, Dutch miners, Belgians, but they were not prisoners like we were. When we went down, we had to stay to the side of the lift. Before we went there, we went by the tool crib. They given us shovels, looked like snow shovels to me. not coal shovels, and the battery lantern, coal miner lantern. And that's where Father and I were split up. I was the only one who was taken by a Polish gentleman into Revier number 4, I think it was. Revier, they call the part of the tunnel. They were numbered. They were called Revier. To get there, we walked at least 10 minutes along the tracks. We climbed the ladder into the next tunnel. We walked another 10-15 minutes. We climbed down again, and that's where we were in the workplace, which was about 4 or 5 foot high. And on one end, this layer of coal as high as the ceiling. On the right side, there was a conveyor on a slot. It was not belt conveyor, but reciprocating. In other words, every time it makes a movement, coal goes further and further down until there was a hole in the ground, apparently to the next tunnel, and there were these coal carriages that were loaded and taken to whatever, to the lift, I suppose. Anyway, when we started to work, that conveyor was very, very close to the coal layer. By noon, that conveyor was far enough where I had to put coal on one pile first and then on conveyor. So I had to do twice the work that was done by the coal miner. And he was not very kind to me either. Anyway, at the end of the work, and the only way I could stretch my back was to stand on my knees, because it's only 5 foot, so I was working like this all day long.
Underground.
Underground, yeah. The only way I could recognize my father is by voice. And he couldn't recognize me because we looked like we were from Africa.
You were black as coal.
Yeah. My father hit my head apparently a few times because he has kicked up coal powder with blood on the back of his head. And finally we got our turn to go up. From there they marched us to tool crib where we had to turn in the tools. They then marched us to a shower building, and that is unique invention. It was almost 2-story building with 1-story building, lower building on each end. The first building you go in, you take your clothes off. And we knew why, not to wear underwear, because there was no laundry. And besides, they would have taken the underwear away from us after processing. Up to that time, we had everything we brought with us, we had with us. And clothing and everything else. And before we even went up, Father and I would start to talk about this place. And both of us decided we have to get away from there to survive, because the conditions under which we worked one day, we wouldn't have survived more than a month. And so we had to get away, and we had to get away as soon as possible before Monday, because Monday we would be registered, and before that time, maybe nobody will notice that we're not there. You understand what I'm talking about? And so we went to this shower room. We took our coveralls and one end. I think maybe almost 100 people at a time, or close to. They take us to the shower room itself, which is two-story building. The ceiling two-story high. Along the wall, all the way around, at about first story level, there was this walkway, about 1.5 to 2 foot wide, with perforated metal planking. Between these walkways, pipes spaced approximately 1 meter apart, full length of this shower room, little below and little above of the walk plank. And they turned the water on for 5 minutes or so, and then trustees would come out on walkways with buckets of soap powder and sawdust mixed, would throw over the people down below, and after a while they will turn the water back on and wash you off. Well, the people who've been there longer than we, that was first time we ever been down, they knew exactly where to go to get water and soap. And they nudged us to the wall below the walkway where we didn't get either one, or very little of that. So when we walked out to the next room, where we were given clean coveralls that we had to put on right there, we didn't look much different than we were when we
walked in.
yeah, except we had runners of streaks of black coal dust in streams of water. My father traded some stuff we brought back with us from Woodsburg, not back, due to that coal mine, for a pair of wire cutters. And we put our clothes on that we were brought to the coal mine in, and we were waiting for an opportunity to air raid sirens. And air raids, they come very, very often. And 10 o'clock in the evening, or shortly thereafter, there was an air raid. The camp, by the way, was surrounded with double wire fence with concertina wire in between, and towers on each corner. And during normal times, when there's no air raid, everything was lit up. When there's an air raid, everything was black. You couldn't light a match. They wouldn't have shot you if you lit a match. Anyway, there was an air raid, and my father and we were standing by the door. And the barrack that we were in was approximately 30 yards or so, maybe less, from the fence. And grass was about knee-high. And as I recall, there was 5 or 6 barracks. And if I recall correctly, just feeling, it was in southwest corner of the coal mine grounds, or southeast rather. And this air raid sirens go off, lights go out, everything is pitch black. I mean pitch black. We run out of the barrack, I was carrying 2 satchels, my own and my father's, little satchels with a few things we took with us for a meal that we brought with us. And my father had wire cutters. He cut the wire. Very quickly we went through. On the other side, we ran, and then we discovered that we were running alongside a narrow paved road. You can see there was no traffic on it. And we ran as fast as we could. But maybe 1 or 1.5 kilometers, we came to a T in a road. That road was traveled roads, There was no traffic at that time when we were there, but it was wide road. And there was a sign on the other side of the road pointing to the left, and it says Duisburg, 23 kilometers to the left from where we were. And our reasoning was this, and we talked about this, my father and I. Trying to make our way to Ukraine was impossible because we were on the west border of Germany, on the Rhine River. On the other side is Benelux states, Belgium, Luxembourg, Holland, France on the south. Although all of them were under German occupation at that time, but they were still countries, other foreign countries to us. And from that point, going through entire Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, possibly Hungary, to get to Ukraine was impossible. We had no piece of paper on us, absolutely none. We had no money whatsoever, of any kind.
Did you speak the language?
No. My father knew a few words, but I didn't speak at all.
So you're 16 or 17, and your father is how old?
Well, he was born in at that time, even now I thought was recently that he was born in 1989, but he was born in 1999. I see on...
In 1899?
Yeah, 1899, on a picture of his gravestone, headstone.
So he's 43 years old.
Yeah.
He has a 16-year-old son.
Yeah.
He's 5 countries away from his home.
Yeah.
He has no money, he has no food.
Right.
Doesn't speak the language.
And not only that, but we decided that the only way for us to have possibility of survival is to head west. Belgium, France, Luxembourg, possibly even Spain, if possible. Because there were people who probably would have been more helpful to us than Germans, because Germans would have apprehended us immediately. Yeah. And we didn't even know what side of Rhine River we were, east or west. So the only thing that the only alternative we had, that sign where it says Duisburg 23 kilometers. We knew that by daybreak we could be there. And from Duisburg, swim across the Rhine River there, you couldn't make it because waters were too wide and too treacherous. You could not go across the bridge because they were heavily guarded. So the only alternative is to go by train. And so we went to Duisburg hoping that we might be able to get freight train or passenger train just to go across the Rhine River and then jump and make our way further down on foot. So we got to Duisburg by 7 o'clock in the morning. We were already at the main railroad station at 7 o'clock in the morning. And we had no problem to get there because as we approached Duisburg itself, there were people walking to work, and we were part of them. We had 2 satchels, we walked to work, and we were in civilian clothes. They couldn't tell whether we were part of or not. And we got to the railroad station fine, no problem at all. Father looked at the departure schedule, and he saw track number, I think was track number 8, or it doesn't matter now. Certain track had a train leaving just few minutes after our arrival there for Paris, which is on the other side of Rhine River. So let's try that. So we go to that platform, no problem. No people except Father and I, and two guys way down by the entrance to the platform. And we decided that we will wait until train begins to move. And then we would jump on one of the coaches, but not inside the coaches, but if this is a coach on the profile, and from this, approximately this location to about this high, there's a little, look like outhouse hanging up there on this coach, and it's called Brickman House, where there's manual brick inside, and there's steps to go up there. So we decided that that's where we will jump on the train, not in the coach, because in the coach we would have been apprehended right away. And we're waiting there for a train to start moving. The station master lifts his semaphore, round disc with on one side is green, the other side is red, and flashlight inside. He lifts his disc, blows his whistle to the driver, locomotive driver, and everything is steam locomotives, by the way. And the locomotive driver blows his whistle, acknowledging that he got his signal, and train begins to move. And just as the train begins to move, all of a sudden these two guys are in front of us, maybe between 60, 65 years of age, much bigger than both of us were, not standing up one on the other, but either one of us, and showed their badges and asking us for papers, which we didn't have. So they took us to railroad police, and it was a basement, I think it was coal basement for coal, where they, through window, because they had a slot to the window, they throw coal through the window into the basement, but it was empty at that time. They put us in this basement. It was narrow, maybe 4 foot across or so. And we stayed there until about shortly before noon. And then they put us into a little tiny van, closed van without windows. And they took us to a prison in the city of Duisburg. We couldn't see where they were taking us, but they let us out in this prison, which was 4 buildings with 1 gate. And they took us to the office where we were interrogated by uniformed policemen. And we were quite frank with him. We told us we were one day working in coal mine. We don't know even which one, and we had to escape. And my father showed the head that was still was oozing. Yeah. And Father said, we are not afraid of work, except conditions, the most important thing to us, survival. So he said that he has a friend by the name of Willie who will come and pick us up and take us to his farm after 3 o'clock. So around 3 o'clock they took us back to the interrogator office, and a guy shows up, a little fellow with a farmer's cape, hat with brush, typical farmer, not talking much, smoking pipe, and this interrogator tells me that you go with Willie, we'll take you to his farm. Great, wonderful. We were elated. We will be working on a farm, fresh air, and maybe even something to eat. And Willie told us to walk in front of him, and he was telling us go left or right, direct us. So we walk in front of him maybe over an hour. Then we came to part of town of Duisburg where everything was brown, covered with brown dust. We found out later on it was iron ore. It was Duisburger Kupferhütte, where they had smelting metal, where they were making ingots. What do you call this? Yeah. And it was Duisburger Kupferhütte. But as we're walking along this cobblestone street, on the right side there's a high brick wall covered with this red-brown dust. We were wondering where Willie's farm were, because as the road goes down, we could see the water, the Rhine River. And when road goes to the water, there's certainly what do you call a pier, not pier, but where the boats tying down.
Docks.
Dock, yeah. And where would be Willie's farm? Everything is industrial. And then about 100 yards further down road, we will see green, olive drab barracks. I don't know how many of them, but I think there was 4 or 5 of them there. And there was 2 rows of barracks, fenced in with barbed wire fence, 2 guards at the gate. And when we were opposite of that those barracks, Willie said links, which means left. We looked back and Willie had pistol underneath his cape and motioned with his pistol to go. So we go in. He takes us to first place where we had to take everything off, confiscated everything we had. We didn't have much, but we had to give up everything. He has given us coveralls with orange rings on each of the knee and the back on coverall painted. So you cannot escape without being seen. And then he takes me to his office, and he tells us, as of this date, you are hard labor inmates. And he said, if you behave yourself, you might be out of this camp in less than a year. And then he picks up his whip, he hits the table with it, and he says, if the rules here are very simple. If you out of line, you will know. That was it. All the rules that he said. And every day was same day. Getting up early in the morning, after breakfast, which was usually coffee and bread and some either meat byproduct or margarine. And that was until evening meal. Half a loaf of bread and coffee. Just like we had same thing in coal mine. Half a loaf of bread and piece of byproduct, meat byproduct or margarine, and we were told this is for all day. If you can eat everything now, or you can take some of it with you in the coal mine. And next meal was soup with white little worms and yellow heads. Well, in this Straflager, they call it, hard labor, we had breakfast similar to what we had in coal mine. And for evening meals, they would bring by truck big kettles, potatoes, cabbage cut in 4, kohlrabi, beets, onions, everything cooked together. I never seen piece of meat in it, but all the vegetables, that's all we had. And each one had his utensil. I got utensil 4, and that was full of vegetables, and that was it. And at work, we did, I myself was working, picking up ingots that were being dropped by crane when they were loading these open cars. They call gondola. In other words, you have only 4 walls and no roof. They were loading gondolas in those cars. I mean, loading ingots in those cars.
And what are the ingots made out of iron?
Iron, yeah. And the magnet crane would drop some of them, and then we had to pick them up and put in place where he can pick up again and put them in the car. And then they would bring coke in cars, also gondolas, into the yard, and they would unload with buckets, crane with buckets, and they couldn't get into the corners, so we had to get remaining
Cork.
coke.
Coke is a form
Coke.
of coal that has been cooked down.
Yeah.
And they use it in refineries.
Yeah, very light, very
Don't act like you've been there, okay? Don't act like
very light, very light.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had to put everything in
They
one,
use coke all
kinda
over
like
Mexico.
crack.
I've
Oh,
seen it
okay,
in
so
the
you know.
refinery.
and then the remainder, he just sets the bucket in the middle of boxcar, and it just,
So you're getting in the boxcar and getting into the corners.
Yeah,
To pull the
yeah.
corners up.
And then sweeping parts of the factory yards, things like that. Menial work.
What time of year is this?
Well, it was September, end of September. We were released in July, 10 months later.
So you went through the winter.
Yeah, winter, yeah.
What was that like?
Winters there, reasonably mild, mostly drizzle, not much snow, very little freezing, by the way. Yeah. In eastern Germany, you get snow this high, temperatures as much as maybe 0 or below. Yeah. But in Duisburg, along the Rhine River, the temperatures were relatively mild, but cold still. I don't remember ever not having sniffles. And from there we were taken to regular labor camp, not hard labor, but labor camp. And that was a multi-story building in the Kupferhütte grounds, with at least 1,000 people there, both sexes, except they were in different parts of the building. They could not get at each other. Yeah. And they had mattresses there, pillows, food was much better, and they had shower there, shower with hot running water. Yeah.
And that was a luxury.
And toilet that was flushing. Yeah. And yeah, it was better than home in Ukraine. Yeah. Anyway, we were taken to this labor camp in July, and there I worked. First, I worked as a fireman on a switching engine, and they had, I would say, maybe 50 or more miles of railroad within grounds of Kupferhütte, where they produce different things in different places, or processes of making ingots. And I was fireman on this switching engine for a while, and then I worked as I don't even know what they call in this country, but switchman I would say. And by the way, I almost worked in this country on the railroad. Yeah. But they hired me, but I never worked. Yeah. I quit before they put me to work. I'll tell you later. Anyway, in October of '44, Duisburg was hit very, very hard. The city was nearly destroyed, bombing. And so they took some people from where we were, Kupferhütte, to dig out bodies and live people from bomb shelters, from basements, from collapsed buildings, and clean up debris. We worked 3 days and 3 nights on the same place without catching sleep now and then. And I don't even remember seeing guards there, by the way, but we worked, yeah. And then after 3 days, they took us all, or many of them, at least myself and 20 others were in one truck. They took us outside of Duisburg, quite a distance outside of Duisburg, where there was a football field, you know, football field, Fußball they call it in German, you kick with foot. And then this field was in an area where 2 railroad tracks were splitting, one going straight and the other one was splitting to the southeast. And in that corner there, both tracks were on grade, not very high grade, maybe 6 to 8 feet grade, and they were going in different direction. And the football field located in that area, they had big tents there, and with straw on the ground, and they brought us there, and they had hot meal for us. And from there, until I separated from my father, they took us to different places, different cities, for 3-4 days at a time, a week at a time, where we had to do the same thing, clean up debris and dig out dead bodies and live people out of rubble. And then they would bring us back to that location. And when I was separated from my father, I say it was December 8th, but I'm not sure exactly, but it was during air raids. I was trying to find somewhere in records of Second World War, and for some reason, nobody likes to talk about bombings. Neither Americans, British, or Germans. Probably Germans don't want to admit they were clobbered, and British and Americans don't want to say because of people they killed, innocent people, like that. That's the only reason. Nevertheless, it was sometime in December. We were standing on the outside of this tent, watching bombers in searchlights, illuminated with searchlights. We saw as they were flying first in one direction and then started turning around and setting up bombing run towards the city of Duisburg. And all of that in searchlights. We saw artillery rounds going off. We saw bombers getting hit, some of them, engines on fire, all of that from ground.
In the sky it's happening.
Yeah, and they were not very high, by the way. And as they set up for bombing run, we heard, just by hearing and seeing in what direction they're flying, you know that you are in a way of where the bombs will be falling. and there's no place to run. Yeah, we were guarded there, by the way. We couldn't get out of there. Yeah. So when we started hearing bombs coming nearer, everybody runs into a tent. I don't know why, but maybe they thought the tent will be keeping bombs from coming down. But we were in tent, and I fell on the floor, holding my hands like this over my head, waiting until I am no more. And there were 2-3 shattering explosions. I felt someone fell on top of me. And then the next thing I knew, I came to my senses. I was walking railroad. I don't know which track it was, but I was walking railroad or in direction away from Duisburg. And I don't even know how long I walked. I was dazed. I was afraid to go back because I thought my father was killed. And I just, my thinking was not clear. I didn't even know why I was walking, but I walked the track until I came to a train, the end of the train, because there was a red lantern in the back hanging. And I climbed up on one of these brick houses, and out of the window I could see the city burning in flame. And I watched for a long time, and then I got so tired I just fell asleep. Weak and tired and hungry, by the way, and cold. I fell asleep. When I woke up, and I think I woke up because the train was rocking, I woke up and I looked out of this window again, and I saw more than one red-orange reflection of burning cities in different directions, searchlights in different directions. Apparently different cities were bombed at the same time or have been bombed. And I don't know where I was, how far I was from Duisburg. And I started to assess my own situation that I was in. I was fugitive, no papers. One option was to surrender to authorities and put in prison camp again, or even shot. Another option I had was remain as a fugitive and try to survive. And I didn't know how, because it was winter, by the way. Fortunately, in that area where I was, it was not so severe, but it was winter. It was December. Yeah. And
you're 17 years old?
yeah. And by the way, at that time I already had clothes on me, because in 3 days that I was digging dead bodies out, and in other places, I found jackets, I found coats, I found shirts. I had 2-3 shirts on me, and
Scavenging.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And in rubbles you find everything. Yeah. We eat good. You always find something in basement of food and things like that. Well, anyway, but still I was not completely warm, because what I had was not very winter type clothes. And then at daybreak, train stopped at signal block. They call it semaphore. You know, where train will stop for a reason, traffic reason. And it was on high grade, by the way. Looking down, there was a line of young trees on the bottom, and maybe 20, 30 yards from grade, when the grade ends down on the bottom, there was a barn. Looked like maybe a place where I could hide out during daytime, because I decided that I cannot stay on train during daytime. First of all, the strafing of trains, strafing of bombings and things like that. Not only that, but the worst part was getting captured. Because if train stops at the fridge station or any part where there are people, somebody will see me. Yeah. And by the way, I was not about to approach anyone for help.
Yeah. Willie taught you
Yeah.
that.
So I had these two options. And so I got off this train, went to that barn. Fortunately for me, barn was to store farm implements for winter storage. And in loft, they had straw or hay. So I climbed up there in loft, dug a hole, and I stayed there, slept most of the time until nighttime. At night, in a distance approximately nearly a mile, less than a mile by the way, there was a farmhouse. There was another one a couple of miles in one direction and the other direction. And I thought at night, later on at night, I could go there and see if I can scrounge something that I could use, food or something. So I went to this house, and the house was built with basement windows above the ground, about 2 foot high or so. And they were secured only with nails, the panes, window panes. So I wiggled out these nails out, 4 nails, took the pane out, reached in on the inside, opened up the window so I can climb into the basement, which I did very quietly. I found some things to eat. I found carrots, I found kohlrabi, I found potatoes. There was a jar of German sausage covered with lard on top. I took that with me. I found a coat, pair of shoes. All of that I took with me. I took all of that into this shed where I was hiding out. And I thought to myself, what in the world I will do with all that? But I took most of it with me, except for the shoes, and I think I had a coat with me. I took coat with me, but I left shoes there. I took all of the food with me. And I decided, by the way, another train stopped at that signal block where I got off. I don't know what time it was at night, but it was not too far into the night. It was shortly before midnight. This train stops at the signal block. I go up there and I get into another brick house. Train took off, and actually, to me, it was it doesn't matter which direction train was going, just so that I can stay alive. Yeah, and when towards the daybreak, I was looking. When train stops, shortly before daybreak, I would look in countryside, by the way, not in city, where I could hide out during daytime. And if there's any place where I could go and find something to eat, like I did first time. And I did this, by the way, in riding trains until 4th of March, 1945.
So you've done it for 3 months?
Almost 3 months.
3 months. You're
Yeah.
17 years old.
Yeah.
You're riding trains, stealing from
And I've been in places on a train. I've been in places, Czechoslovakia, I've been in Hungary, Austria. In fact, I was captured in Austria. In Austria, before the river, there was a bridge. Train stopped because of bombing. Graz was under bombing air raid. I could see from where I was. It was way outside of city, a river crossing bridge. And train stopped. And I stayed on train until close to daybreak, and I had to get off, no matter what. And I saw this farmhouse at Foothills, and quite a distance. I walked in snow about the deep to that house, and that their stock barn, their cows were under the same roof with the house. So I opened up door, it was nice and warm, cows there. It was not heated, but body heat. And there was a pile of straw right next to that door where it's open on the left side. I climbed in, made a little hole, covered up myself with the rest of the straw, fell asleep. And I thought I will survive until nighttime and then leave. And sometime in the morning, somebody prodding me with pitchfork. And it was a German or Austrian farmer who was holding fork at my throat. And then he hollered for his wife to call gendarme. Apparently she did, because and he stood all this time over me, nearly 2 hours. Every time I moved, he would try to prick me with pitchfork. And gendarme came, took me to SS in city of Graz. They were housed in part of the building. The entire building collapsed. I could see the walls. Inside was on the bottom. There was a building on side still with upper floor, but upper floor was not there, but ceiling. It was closed. The windows were makeshift, boarded with boards. And they took me there. There was German SS, and they were interrogating. They had an interpreter with him, interrogated me nearly a couple hours, and they thought I was a Soviet infiltrator. I didn't even know until the war was over. When I met my brother in Ukraine, at that time I was interrogated. He was on the other side of Graz fighting German troops.
Wow.
Yeah. He was in Soviet army. Yeah. And I didn't know that. And that's probably the reason they thought I was a Soviet infiltrator. Yeah. Anyway, they was going to shoot me. They told me to sit on a bench against the wall. I did. I sat there until late in the afternoon. Soon door opens, and a German high-ranking officer, apparently, because when he walked in, wearing long leather coat, everybody jumped up and "Hi Hitler" and clicked their heels and Herr so-and-so. And he was quite high-ranking officer. He takes his coat off. There was a table on the one side and the left side of the bench, and two chairs where I was interrogated. He sits down there. There was a lamp on the table, and he said, he had Polish name, by the way. He told me I could not remember where it was. And he said he was from city of Duisburg. And through interpreter, he started to ask me everything about city of Duisburg, what I was, what was the name of Germans that I worked with, what kind of work I did, what the barracks I was in, and all of that. And I told him the truth. And then after he finished, he got up, did like this, and he said to the other guys, the interpreter tells me, he said, this guy deserves to be commended for surviving in harsh winter as we have that long without being caught. Yeah. And he told the driver, I think it was his driver, he didn't go with us. His driver took me to outskirts of city of Villach. There was German barracks there, not very big, but very luxurious. And he took me into a basement. And by the way, that was when I was captured, 4th of March. He took me into the basement, and there was a cook there, and he says that is your chef. You take orders from him. He turned out to be a Yugoslav, so I could communicate with him.
Nice.
And we got to be buddies, you know.
And you got a lot of food.
Oh, I tell you, I gained weight. Yeah. And one day, German truck came by, military truck, and took at least 20 of us from that particular workplace and took us to city of Villach, which is less than an hour drive from Klagenfurt. And they put us in a barrack that looked like vacated labor camp. It didn't look like hard labor camp because it was not double wire fenced. Looked like a labor camp, just plain labor camp that was vacated. And we stayed there overnight. The next day, they put some of us on truck. They took us across river towards the mountains to another labor camp where we stayed another week. And from there, they would walk us maybe 15, 20 minutes to location where we worked. We had to build roadblocks, cutting down trees and build roadblocks, dig gun emplacements, and then they will take us to different place, maybe yards or 10, 15 minutes from there. And that went on until, and by the way, over a period of time until May, when I was liberated, we've been in 2 or 3 different labor camps like that, vacated labor camps, and did same thing.
Are you still with your chef?
Oh no,
You're gone.
the chef was gone. They didn't take him. They needed him. Anyway, over a period of time until I was liberated, I've been in 2 or 3 these different camps. And by the way, in good weather, anytime there was good weather, we were expecting and all got some strafing. Fighter planes would peel off from formation, make a diving run, pull up and join the squadron flight. And I was in process of digging this horseshoe-shaped gun emplacement. It's shaped like a horseshoe with peninsula in the middle where they put machine gun. Mm-hmm. So this was a half round. I was nearly finished with this gun emplacement, and there was a young SS guard. And by the way, we were guarded by wounded, walking wounded from different branches of German military, Navy, Luftwaffe, SS, Wehrmacht, yeah. And this young SS man who jumped into trench on the other side when I jumped. And by the way, the reason I jumped because I heard this fighter plane. You hear single engine plane revving up the engine. That means he is diving. He's going to make strafing run. You cannot see him because they always came from the sun. You're trying to look at him, you're looking at the sun. But you hear him up there someplace. So you hear him coming down. I jumped on one side of this trench. This assessment jumps in the other side. And then when plane pulls up, this assessment jumps up on this peninsula and for no reason hits me with his rifle butt across my bridge of my nose. And that was around close to 3 o'clock in the morning, or maybe around 3 o'clock in the, I mean, not morning, but the afternoon. By the end of the day, my face was so swollen, I had to keep my eyes open like that. And I couldn't quit working because I would have been shot. At the end of the work, with help of my colleagues, I made it to the barracks. Fortunately for me. And by the way, it's not the first time I came under the wire. All my life, I always get under the wire before something comes down. And that was no exception. I was in this barrack on lower bunk. There's a guy on upper bunk, was Polish. I could talk to him. And then in the morning, Germans, where the guard room is at the end of the barrack, they would open the door and hit the door with some object, heavy object. Aufstehen, aufstehen. That means get up, wake up. And that would be bright and early in the morning to get ready for work. Well, this day, nobody hammered or banged the door or screamed aufstehen. And nobody went brave enough to go there and see what was up, because they were afraid that they might get clobbered. And pretty soon we heard truck vehicle. You can hear a truck vehicle driving. And this guy in top bunk starts screaming, Polacy, Polacy, which means Polacks, Polacks. And we thought they were Polish. And it turned out that there was armored vehicle with a pennant flying on antenna with Polish colors, white and blue. But they were not Polish. It was maybe unit insignia or something. White and blue pennant, triangular, flying on antenna. Nevertheless, we were liberated. And it was not the end of the war yet, by the way. And I don't know precise date when it was, but it was not the end of the war. Because I found out that the war ended when I was in a field hospital. I don't even know who ran the field hospital, but it was military hospital, Allied forces, British or US or what. I was in field hospital when I found out that war was over.
And how old are you?
Well, 1945. subtract from subtract 1926 from 25.
19.
Yeah, 18, 19, yeah. And I stayed in that hospital little over 2 weeks, I think it was, until my swelling came down, and until I no longer needed, well, I shouldn't say that, because in camp I was still treated for my replaced dressing on my nose. And then when I was able to see, I was put in this DP camp, displaced person camp. It was UNRWA camp run by Polish nationals. And there was a lady, we were receiving dry rations, by the way, and she was cooking for me and a few other guys. And one day she tells me, she says, Valentine, the office people found out that you are Ukrainian, and they are obligated to turn you over to Russians. They had to, yeah. So I thought I do not give them opportunity. And I was already able to walk and all that, except my face were green, blue, black, and all the other colors. Swelling went down, but the colors stayed with me for months thereafter until everything was normal. I decided I will go and look for my father. So I left camp, take little provisions with me. And by the way, I was issued liberation certificates, and I was issued displaced person certificates and stateless certificates. In other words, I did not belong to any country at that camp. And so I went looking for my father, and I thought I will go looking in places where he would be looking for me. That would be places where we've been together. And first place that we got, when we got to Germany, was Würzburg. That's where I wanted to go. So I was hitchhiking with Americans, with British. Sometimes I would take train. The trains were running for one blown out bridge to the next blown bridge, between two bridges. And then you go on the other side, you take another train and go to another bridge. Yeah. And that's the way railroad were running at that, or tunnels.
So how long did you search for your father?
Well, I searched my father until I decided that it was useless. When I found out about it, until really to be truthful, August of 45, and I tell you why. I went to Würzburg, and I couldn't find my father. And in August of 1945, I met an individual from neighboring village back home.
In the Ukraine?
Yeah. And he was much older than I. So I didn't know him back home. Nevertheless, when we got to know each other, he tells me that you have nothing and no one to go back to. And I tell him to explain. And he says, your village with 13 other villages were burned to the ground, and everyone alive was killed as a reprisal for killing of 14 German officers, Luftwaffe officers, a couple of days prior to this massacre. So it was one village burned for every officer killed by one of the underground factions.
So now you're totally alone.
Yeah. So at that time, there was no communication whatsoever. No mail, no telephones, no radio, nothing. There's no way to verify what he was telling me. And I had to take his word because he is older than I am, and I believed him. I had no family left.
Reason not to, right?
Here, on one side, I am giving up my hope on finding my father alive because this August, when I met him, it was after I've been to city of Duisburg, where I was with father in hard labor and also in labor camp. And then in Duisburg, I found out that an individual who escaped from Russian Soviet forced repatriation camp in city of Hamm, Hamm, yeah, two M's. There was forced repatriation camp of Soviets. And this individual escaped short time before I met him in Duisburg. He told me that he heard the name of Kushnir. He never met the individual, but he heard someone with that name. So I went there. I went into camp itself, and I was nearly captured there. It was German army barrack, just one room from one end to the next, bunks on each side, and there were families that were in process of being repatriated, and also probably single people, had blankets hanging on each side, and that was their room. So one can hear 2, 3 rooms over what they're talking about. So lady, where I was in this one room, just couple, no kids, looks out a window and he tells me you better get out of here because Russians are coming. I look out the window and I saw halfway between the gate guard house and this house where I was in, and by the way, the barracks on all 4 sides of the this installation, and there's the gate here, and I am in this building, and all the entrance to the building is from this. Now there's no building here, but 3 sides. Entrance from back side on all the buildings. So I walked in from here. There's a fence, and down here is a high grade, and there's railroad tracks, multiple railroad tracks, where it goes into the marshalling yard, the beginning of marshalling yard. And this grade, by the way, was fairly high, and fence was about yay high, and barbed wire strung across on top. I guess they didn't have to have any higher fence because they had guards walking. Well, yeah. And so when lady told me, I reach into my little satchel, pull out my 632 Walter with pearl handles. Didn't belong to me, belonged to Peter in Würzburg. And I will tell you about this pistol separately when I get through with this here. I pull out this pistol and I run towards the fence. They're coming around, they're shooting at me. I'm shooting that way, running that way. I jumped over the fence, rolled down grade, wasn't hit, jumped up between the freight cars, walked towards the railroad station, and made my way to Würzburg. And I decided to stay there and quit looking for my father. Oh, no, that's what, after that I met this individual and then decided that I quit looking for my father. That pistol, what happened? When I returned to Duisburg, when I returned to no, I do not. Before I went to Duisburg, I took that pistol from Peter, and I took that pistol from Peter and went to Duisburg to look for my father. I didn't find him there. I went to Ham, where I was nearly captured. And then on the way to Würzburg, I am confused. Time frame. I was in camp in Würzburg. I went to look for my father in Duisburg. Okay, that had nothing to do with. I met the individual from Kitzingen after I'd been to Würzburg and Duisburg, and came back to Würzburg camp, DP camp. Then I met this individual who told me about my
Your family.
family. Yeah. So one day, I went out of the camp on weekend, by the way. I went out of the camp, and I very often took this Walter 632 pistol from my friend Peter with me. I came back to the camp, and as I was walking by the German, what they call truck gardener, not very big garden, but to sell produce. He was had garden on grade from camp below, but his camp above. Road goes down to the camp. I go by his gate, and he says, "Valentine, what's going on in camp?" And I ask him, "Well, what's going on up there? Tell me." Well, he said, "Come in, we'll take a look." Both of us walking, this is the camp on grade, his garden. We're looking over the fence, we see American MPs and Russian soldiers loading people on Dusenhafs by force, taking them away. So I never went to the camp.
Were they Germans that they're taking away?
No, there were American MPs and Russian soldiers
Taking the
by force, taking Ukrainians by trucks to Soviet zone of Germany. Yeah, there's a write-up about specifically two copies specifically about this, and this is official, by the way. Yes, yeah.
And by the way, there are, I mean, like, he's got a story, just,
Yeah.
you know, it's a paraphrase of it, but there's all kinds of.
That is copy from official publication, by the way.
That happened.
Yeah, the entire process, what they were doing, how. So from that gardener, I went to railroad station.
Back to the railroad.
Yeah, back to railroad in Würzburg. Now, Würzburg lays along the Main River between two fairly high hills. So the railroad station gets fairly dark early in the afternoon. Around 4 o'clock, it's pretty dark, especially between the railroad cars. That railroad, by the way, was rubble. I mean rubble. Metal twisted, buildings collapsed. There was not a one single pane of glass over the railroad station. Everything was destroyed. Yeah. And so I'm walking between these trains, looking for a train that is facing west, because I don't want to go east.
Right.
Yeah, I want to go west. So I found this railroad car that on both sides doors were partially open, about yay wide, sliding doors. And I saw suitcases laying in the middle of this boxcar. And it had a straw in it. So I thought I will climb in and sit down next to the suitcases, and maybe I find opportunity to open some of them and see if there's anything I could use, because that's my way of livelihood.
Right.
Yeah. And so I positioned myself on this side of the these suitcases. They were here. Train facing west, the engine somewhere up there. And on this end of the car, Germans speaking. And at that time I spoke little German. Not much, but some. And they start to ask me who I was. And I tell them I am Ukrainian. So they start to chat me. How come you're not going home? When during war you all wanted to go home. Now you have a chance. How come you're not going home? And I ask him, where are you from? And he says, from Ostpreußen. That means East Schlesien, East Germany. And I say, how come you're not going home? And he said, for some reason that you're not going home. So we back and forth like that. Well, on this end there were people there too, but I didn't hear no voices there. Apparently there was only one guy there. When train started to move when it was already dark. Steam engine, very slowly. No trains went fast in Germany after the war was over, because tracks were not maintained. And by the way, in those days, they didn't have solid tracks, they were bolted. And yeah, every time axle goes across it, pump, 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 pump. And when a train goes on the switch, it just shocks you, throws you from one side to the other. It shifts, car shifts. Well, train is heading west, and along the Main River, by the way, I could see the birch trees and moonlight through the open door, lighting up between the shadow of the trees. And I am sitting there waiting for an opportunity to open one of the suitcases. And then I hear a voice.
From the other end of the train.
That guy came from the other end of the train. And he is asking me in Russian, are you Ukrainian? So I was facing this way, by the way. And I am turning around and trying to get up. I had one knee on the floor, and I had leather shoes on the straw, on a wooden floor, very slippery. And I was getting up when I was almost on both of my feet, like that. All of a sudden, train hits the switch on railroad tracks, shifts, and I lost my footing and fell on him. When I lost my footing, I had my hands stretched like this. One hand on this wall, the other hand on sliding door. And my feet went out from under me and slid in that direction. So I came down on the floor, flat. But that guy didn't. He went out the door. Yeah.
What was he? Was he?
I don't know. I didn't ask him his name. All I know that when I looked up at him, I saw the outline of Schoid outside of his riding pants and his boots.
Oh, he was a soldier.
Yeah. And he told me that to get off, before he went out, he told me to get off the train at next stop. He got out, but I didn't. Yeah.
Wow. So,
Well, but listen to this.
Yeah.
At that particular moment, train was not going fast. No trains went fast in Germany after the war was over. At that very moment, the train, the boxcar that I was in, goes into the tunnel. And that tunnel was fairly long and went into the direction of Fulda to the north, not along the Main River. and the tunnel and the boxcar filled with smoke and steam and noise, and I was sitting there shaking, scared. Not what happened to that guy, what would have happened if I went with him. That's what I was scared about. When train went out on the other side of tunnel, I figured that maybe it would be a good idea if I did get off at next train stop, because if that guy is alive, he will tell authorities what happened. But even if he was dead, somebody will be asking people that were on train if they know something about it.
So now the war's over, you're Ukrainian, you're heading west. How do you get to the U.S.?
Well, listen to this. You want to start now?
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you a very, very important story, because it's part of future story.
Okay.
Train stops in Fulda, and I decided that I have to get off that train, because if by daytime, maybe somebody will start looking for me. I got off that train, still night, trying to make my way from the train to the edge of the freight yard, marshalling yard, or maybe another train. And couple tracks over, I'm walking by one of the boxcars. Something good smells, something smells good, like candy, And so I knew there was something good inside of this boxcar. And this boxcar didn't have a lock on it, but it had a seal on it. And that seal was a metal band with seal on it. So I reached out and trying to do this, to break the seal, to get into the boxcar. And next thing I knew, there was a lantern shining in my face, about 10 feet away from me. This big military lantern with round lens. And a little below that, I see 45 pointing on me. And someone in very, very broken German asking me, "What are you doing?" Before he finished this sentence, my hand was down, and maybe my hand was not in light beam, because he didn't say anything about it. Nevertheless, he said, "What are you doing?" And I said to him, "Well, I just got off that train, trying to get off the railroad station," in German, as much as I could. Apparently, he noticed that my German was not better than his, but he tries back in German, say, "Who are you? Wer sind Sie?" So I tell him, "I am Ukrainian." He puts his 45 in a holster, comes to me, shakes my hand, in Ukrainian addresses me. He says, "My name is Stefan Flak. I am from Lackawanna, New York."
And he's an American soldier?
He was GI.
Wow.
He thought you were German.
Say again?
He thought you were German? To start with?
No, he knew I was. No, he noticed that my German was not perfect.
But when he saw you breaking in,
I was trying to break into the boxcar to see what's good in it, because I smelled something good in it. No. And anyway, as we're walking off the railroad station or marshalling yard, he is asking me where I was going. Well, all of that was, he caught me by surprise. I don't know where I was going, but he wants to know where I was going. So the only thing I could think in that direction was Bremerhaven. So I said I was going to Bremerhaven. And he asked me, are you in a hurry to get there? I said, no, not at all. And he tells me, well, he says, in a few days, I think he said 4 days, he was going back to the United States. And he asked me if I would like to stay with them so he can practice Ukrainian. So I said, why not? So he takes me to this tent, squad tent. There was 6 or 8 other GIs there. He's the only one who spoke Ukrainian, Stefan Flak. And I spent, I think, 4 days there. I made up their cots, GI, folding cots, cleaned up their place. I picked up all of the cans of cookies and marmalade and cans of ham and eggs and things like that. They didn't want it. I had to put everything in my satchel together with my 632 welder because I didn't know when and how I will have next meal. Yeah, and so I stayed there with him 4 days, and then he tells me, Valentine, I'm going to be leaving back to the United States. I'm going to put you on a train that goes to Bremerhaven. And when you ever get to the United States, look me up in Lackawanna, New York, Stefan Flak. So I promised him. It's good.
You want a break?
No, I'm all right. Well, anyway, he takes me to this train, empty freight train, with 2 cabooses. You know what caboose is?
Yeah.
Yeah. One after the engine, few cars, and the last one on the end. He takes me to caboose at the end. There were 3 MPs in it, military police, in this caboose. He told them to take me to Bremerhaven. And I wanted to give something him as present. And the only thing I had was Walter 632. So I have given him the 632. He given me carton of Lucky Strikes.
Garden of Lucky Strikes.
Well, the reason I'm crying because he passed away before I could see him. That train went into port of embarkation, very heavily guarded. When train stops, MP is getting off, walking away. I picked up from whatever they have left. I looked around. What I saw was mountains, stacks of pallets, each pallet full of cardboard boxes, rations,
Food.
sea rations, and whatever else. About 8 feet space between each stack. And these stacks were 8, 10 high.
Wow.
High. It was like, to me, it was like skyscrapers. Between these stacks, grass was about yay high. So, and I noticed from caboose, there was a guard, uniformed guard, in blue uniform, not American, and helmet liner with white band around, guards, walking in front of the stacks along the track and looking in between. And I waited until I could time when he will turn around on the other end. I'm getting off the truck. I'm going between these stacks of pallets. I found one of these, what do they call this, cement sewer pipe,
Yeah,
maybe
round.
five foot across, but yay high, maybe this high, in middle of the, between both ends of the pallet row, in this high grass. And there was a water faucet next to it. And I look at pallets, I say, well, there's my food, there's my water. To bathroom, I can go everywhere else. So, and apparently someone else was there before me, because whoever was there, he built, the grass, by the way, was grown, so he must have been before me. But on top of this pallet, there were cardboard boxes laid out across to have a roof. So I crawled under, and when I went across I started to explore the countryside, so to speak. I noticed a few pallets where the boxes were checking out of the stack, and I did the same thing. And one box lasted me forever. I tried to remember how many sea rations were. It was 2 lengths. It was this long, and was 4 and 8 or 4 by 6 stacks. So, and in each one of them were different things. You found ham and eggs, corned beef, fish, all kinds of different.
There were M&Ms and Hershey bars.
The candy, yeah, candy. Tootsie Rolls about the yay long, yeah. And package of cigarettes, 4 cigarettes to a package. Yeah, matches, maybe 10 matches to a match box about this big. Anyway, I had everything I needed. And I think I stayed there a couple of weeks. And I got lonesome. I had to get out to see people, living people. And I knew it. I got in first time. I knew I could get in there again. It's just to catch right train. Yeah. So I decided to take a ride to wherever train goes, take enough provisions with me to get back to Bremerhaven, and ride again. So I did this couple times, by the way. Not once, but couple times. Towards the October, towards the end of October, towards the end of October, I was on one of the trains, and by the way, at that time, loaded trains crossed to the west side of Rhine River in Cologne and went clear up to Mainz and then crossed back to the to the east side, because the railroad was not, bridges on the east side between Cologne and Mainz were not fit to for loaded trains. The bridge at Bielefeld, extremely high bridge. They, I think engineers built bridges, as you see in the olden days, railroads made out of real thick logs in mountain countryside. Well,
high.
that kind of bridge was temporary bridge was near Bielefeld, where only empty trains could cross. It couldn't carry heavy loads. So that's why heavy trains went on the west side.
The empty trains on the east.
And the empty trains went on the east side to the Bremerhaven. Well, anyway, I'm on the west side of Rhine River, across from 7 mountains on the east side of the Rhine River, just little south of Bonn. Now, countryside is different. In those days, railroad was following river, and highway was following base of the hills and mountains between mountains and railroad track. And the road had high trees on both sides of the highway. Well, I was on this gondola car covered with canvas. When I started out from Bremerhaven, the gondola car that I was under I had no idea what it had inside. I opened up and I found out it was nothing that I could consume continuously. I think it was peaches, canned peaches or something. Yeah. Now, how much can you eat of canned peaches? Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I crawled into next gondola. I found out something that I cannot eat either. Climbed out to the next gondola. I found out there were these Tootsie Rolls about yay long. How much can you have of that? By the time I got into the next gondola and train moving, by the way, I was nauseous from everything that I had.
Peaches and Tootsie Rolls.
And in that last gondola, it was evaporated milk
Oh no! Evaporated milk.
and daylight coming up.
Yeah.
And I figured, Valentine, you better get off that train and trying to catch empty train back to Bremerhaven and trying to catch something good in it. And so I figured I will take a box of milk with me and trade for something edible. So what I did, and by the way, in Germany, these signal blocks, I don't think they are operated now by wires that really move. And they are mounted on metal posts about the high off the ground, and wheels where wire runs. And they can be very dangerous, by the way, if you don't jump off the train just right. Yeah. And I knew exactly how to do it, yeah, because I did this before. Yeah. And the trains, as I said, the trains were not moving fast. So and these posts were distance far enough to be in between where you can, if you hit something, you hit the wires and wires will bounce you off further down. Or you just miss wires and you roll in little ball and roll down grade a little bit and get up and run. That's what I did. I threw off this carton of milk. Fortunately, box didn't break. It fell so that it slid down grade. Was bruised a little bit, but not broken. I ran back, picked up that box, put on my left shoulder, and I ran across meadows towards the highway. meadow was, I would say, maybe a couple of 100 yards across from 7 mountains on the Mine River, by the way. And grass was full of dew. And I was wet. And I was about halfway to that meadow. Pow, pow! Like cannonball went off next to my left ear. And my vision became blurred. I thought I am dead. I looked down, I could see through a white milk that was running on my face, that splashed over my face. I see my feet still running. So I didn't have enough sense to fall down. Fortunately, that guy who shot me, the MP on last caboose, only 1 round hit, by the way, because I looked at that box later after train took off. One row, complete row of cans was taken out, 1 round next to my ear. It could have been here. Yeah.
So you missed getting
But
shot.
here's the thing.
You didn't get shot. You just got milk all over you.
Yeah, but in situation like that, you don't think straight. I look down, I run, so I run. And I didn't have enough sense to fall down. And when I stopped, I turned around and I looked, and the trail where I knocked off the dew, the spot where I was hit, there was a white trail to where I was standing. Evaporated milk.
And the war's over.
That was in November 1945.
Do you want to take a break?
So that's when I quit riding trains. I knew I had to find some other way to make a living. And I went to DP camps. And by the way, I never stayed in DP camps very long before November because of danger of being repatriated forcibly to Soviet Union. And but I did travel to different DP camps only to get ration card there and use other amenities that they might have to offer. And then move to the next DP camp, did same thing. To survive, of course. And after this episode, near 7 mountains, I decided that railroad living is not my cup of tea. But I still had to use that railroad to get from place to place. So I went to Munich, and it was November, early November. Munich railroad station was not there at all. I have pictures of it, by the way. I can show it to you when you get to my place in Kingsville. And the walkways where you board the different platforms, there was no roof over it. Normally it's tunnel. There were only beams, heavy beams across this tunnel where trucks were laid on it. It was raining, and beams were about yay wide. And I'm standing on one side on this particular beam, trying to roll cigarettes from butts that I picked up and dried. And there's a guy standing across from me, a little shorter than I am, looking at me and looking closely how I roll my cigarette. And then he probably knew that I was Ukrainian, but he addressed me in Russian. He said, "Can I have a drag from your cigarette when you get finished?" I said, sure. His name was Victor Vertkov. And I spent it with him time from November of 1945 until I emigrated to the United States. Short, I can tell you the rest of the story starting from now when you get there. But how I got here to this country, here's the story. Victor and I, we got a job with 17th Air Ammunition Squadron in Zeppelinheim, Germany. That's across the Autobahn from Rhein-Main Air Base. It was all black outfit except for the officers. Dixie Hampton was second lieutenant then, and his wife Norma Jean, they lived in New Eisenberg, just about 8 miles from Zeppelinheim. I used to work for him. He used to wear lots of hats. He was mess officer, supply officer, motor pool officer, a pilot, armament officer, all of that. Because the high-ranking officer didn't want to bother with all that. So they put everything on second lieutenant. And I was his Jeep driver. Of course, I couldn't drive that time. But the only thing I did was keeping his Jeep clean. And his favorite thing in winter when black ice was there, driving his Jeep without roof on it, and spinning and singing a song. When the Führer said, we never bomb his place, we heil, right on the Führer's face. That was Dixie Hampton. Bless his soul. And Norma Jean, both of them were no longer with us. In 50s, in 46, before he returned to the United States, he asked me if I would like to come to the United States. So I told him that I will go to Timbuktu if you pay my way. I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. And so he initiated a process to bring me to the United States. At that time, the only official papers I had, what I got from UNRWA, United Nations Agency in Austria, the liberation certificates, the displaced person certificates, and stateless certificates. I had no birthday certificates. When we went to American consulate, I was told they wanted birthday certificates also. So a lady who was taking care of the paperwork, she said, there's a Catholic priest in Schwanheim, I think it was, near Frankfurt, who issues birth certificates. And I went to his place. I had to have certificates on Monday in consulate. It was Friday. I rode my bicycle 26 kilometers to his place. He came up to the little picket fence, white picket fence. I was on sidewalk. He smelled like he had some 4 roses or something. And he started to ask me all kinds of questions about my family. And I told him, my brother, he is a year older than I am. He was born in 1925. I was born in 1926. I knew that. I didn't know exactly what date or month. You see, we never give birthdays back home because we could not afford. I never saw my birth certificates anywhere until 1989, when I went to Ukraine and was fortunate to find original. and it says 1st December 1926. That is my precise birthday. 1st December 1926. Well, at that time in Germany, I had to have this birth certificates on Monday, and it was Friday. When we took all of the data, he said, come back on Saturday and your certificates will be ready. I rode my bike back to him on Saturday in the afternoon. He hands me an envelope. I stick in my inside pocket, ride back home, opened up, birthday, 8 December 1926. How in the world, or how should I take the certificates to consulate? And it's too late to ride back to the priest. I never make it in Monday. And I thought to myself, who in the world will know except me and the Almighty? So I was...
So you have a new birthday.
Yeah, 8 December 1925, that's the official date. I am really a year younger. I am 91, not 92. I'm going to be 91. So it's to my advantage, by the way. I started to draw Social Security earlier.
Now everybody knows. You're in trouble now.
We'll keep it secret.
Anyway, Dixie prepared all the paperwork, went to the United States in 1946. I didn't hear nothing from anyone from anywhere. And then Captain Wilson, who was squadron commander at that time, one day gives me an envelope from American consulate telling me that the only thing there, I asked him to read because I couldn't read that time English. And he said, well, if you're ready to emigrate to the United States, you better get your butt to Bremerhaven. So the officers that I worked for chipped in, bought me a suit, German suit, and that suit, by the way, was made of wood fiber. Yeah, you could hear cracking noise when. Yeah, but it looked good. It got me to where I was going, and I arrived in Bremerhaven late October. And we were shown films about the United States and things like that, how to cross streets without getting hit by car, and all of the essentials. And we left early November Bremerhaven on a two-stocker Liberty ship by the name of Omar Bundy. About 800 or more displaced persons of different nationalities. And when boats started to rock in rough seas, that ship started to smell like rotten oranges, people throwing up. And so I volunteered to work way down in the hull of the ship, chipping paint and paint the hull. I could hear rushing water underneath, and I was so careful not to break the hull through because I wanted to get to the United States. And there were 4 sailors working with me when we got, and by the way, ship was originally scheduled to go to Staten Island, but because of rough sea in Atlantic, it went to Boston. When we got to Boston, these 4 sailors that I worked with chipped in $4 apiece. So I had 4 real American dollars with me when I got off the ship. In Europe, at that time, they used funny money, script they used to call them. Yeah. Anyway.
So wait, you got off the boat and you had $16?
$16.
16, okay.
Yeah. And I got off the ship. There was a set of tables. At each table there was a young lady asking different questions. The first table, lady asked me, "What's your name?" "Valentine Kushnir." That's my original name. She looks up at me. "Do you have middle name?" Middle name? And I thought of 17 Air Ammunition Squadron, all of the black guys. I observed very often where two or more would be arguing and sometimes fighting. And the one who is addressed with profanity would respond, "Don't you call me any middle names." So to me, middle name was profanity. And I thought to myself, why in the world a young lady like this asking me to say something bad? And I said, "No, I don't have a middle name." So my name now is Valentine Hampton without middle name. My last name in Europe, Valentine, is called Valentine, masculine, ending in consonant. Valentine, ending in E, vowel. There is no such thing like Valentine until, there was no such thing until Americans occupied Germany with E on the end. So when I came to this country, a lady, the only Valentine she knew with E on the end. So until this day, I have E on the end, Valentine E. Yeah. So two things, not very important. From there, I went to Hampton's farm on the New River in Independence, Virginia. Dixie's mom picked me up, and her daughter and her son-in-law, at night in Pulaski, Virginia. Took me to a New River farm. They had 200 acres or so on a hillside. And the only way that you can work that hillside with hillside plow. Do you know, anyone knows what the hillside plow is? Okay, you plow one direction, you turn around, you flip that, only, not the plow itself, only the blade flip upside down, and you plow the other direction. That's hillside plow. Because with regular plow, you would have been going empty-handed or free to the other end and start a new row. Yeah, this way you can, yeah. And then taking care of the animals, horses, pigs, chickens, everything that they have on farm. I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, do the chores, and then cut the wood, go plow the hillside, whatever farm, regular farm work. Dixie came that year for Christmas or New Year and said, "Valentine, let's go on top of the hill. I'm going to get some, what do you call that green plant they married under?"
Mistletoe.
Huh?
Mistletoe?
Yeah, mistletoe. He was going to shoot some mistletoe down with his grandfather gun, double barrel, 12 gauge. So we went up there on the hill, and he aims on that mistletoe, and he pulls both triggers. Dixie spun around, he sat down against the tree, shook his hand, and I was standing there laughing at him. He never got mistletoe. Nevertheless, I thought it was funny to watch him. And before he left Germany, he told me, he says, "Valentine, you're going to my mommy's place. I am not sure you will like it, but if you don't like it, I'm going to come and get you, and you're going to live with him wherever he's at." When Army Air Corps broke away from Army and became Air Force, he stayed with the Air Force. And he was based with Air Force with Special Air Mission Squadron at Boiling Field in Washington, D.C. And they used to live on 807 South Oak Street in back of Navy Annex in Arlington, Virginia. And so one day in March, and one step backwards, on the weekends I would go to Independence. I had that $16 with me. Cigarettes at that time were 10 cents a pack. 10 cents a pack. A Tootsie Roll was 5 cents a pack. It's 5 cents, this big. Banana split for 35, 40 cents. You can get banana with 3 ice creams about this size with nuts and cherry and whipped cream on top. And I had this $16, so it lasted me quite some time because I would go only on weekends. Well, I was slowly running out of money. And one day I was in Independence, Virginia, spent all of my money. I was talking to young people of my age in diner and I had to get back home. It was getting dark. And that road from main highway to farm, it mud about the head deep. And I had to be there in the morning. So I'm taking taxi. I told taxi driver, Miss Hampton will pay you next day. Next morning at breakfast, Dixie's mama started to chastise me for taxi and charging to her. And I said, Mrs. Hampton, you're not paying me anything. I had $16 with me, I ran out of money. I had to be here. And she said, we could have taken care of the animal. Taxi was only $3. Of course, $3 in those days is $13 now. But nevertheless, there were not poor people, by the way. They are Hamptons that came to this country on Mayflowers. Yeah. Anyway, but she didn't stop. And then I tell to Mrs. Hampton, Mrs. Hampton, I think I go and get me a job so I can pay you back what you paid the taxi. So, and I had attaché case, size maybe twice big as this here, this thick, a set of underwear and a couple of pairs of socks and a couple of packs of cigarettes. I went upstairs, got my little suitcase, and I started to walk up the hill to the main highway so I can hitchhike to Galax, Virginia, where I knew some people. And Mrs. Hampton came out, I'm going to get you deported. I said, good, you pay my way. I'm going to start paying you 25 cents an hour. No, I said, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to give you money back, and then we go from there. So I went up, I went to hitchhike to Galax. There was a Jewish gentleman whom I known. He was from Poland, by the way. Had a restaurant there, spoke Polish. And I could speak Polish much better then than I do now. And we could communicate. I told him what happened. He said, don't worry, Valentine, you can eat here. I'm going to put you up someplace for tonight, and we'll see what we do tomorrow. So I washed dishes there. I had evening meal, and he takes me to a jailhouse in Galax, only one room, by the way, but no lock on it, one bed, and I went to sleep there. There was no light switch. Light switch was somewhere else. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, someone shook me. I look up, Dixie. He smiled, he says, Valentine, I knew it would happen.
Come on.
Yeah, let's go. So he took me to Arlington, Virginia, to where he and Norma Jean lived. Next day I went out and I got me a job at Texaco filling station that was owned by two brothers. Bergman, their name is, I think it was, and both of them owned this station. Speak Polish, ideal for me. I don't know how to learn English. They hired me as a grease monkey. And it was on Columbia Pike on the way to Pentagon. Big wheels stopping by there. One of the guys will get out, leave his car there, and drive to Pentagon so he wouldn't have to look for a place to park. I would take care of his car, lubricate, wash, filled up. On the way home, he hands me $5 or $10. So I was making more money on tips than I was getting in salary. Eventually, I end up with $800. February, from March to July, I had $800, plus Dixie took me to Washington, D.C., and had a hand-stitched gabardine suit made for me, gray color. Bought me a pair of shoes with my money, and white shirt, and a tie. On weekends, I would go to Washington, D.C., and you know, a grease monkey in those days, there were no soaps as they are today. They had soap powder with sawdust, and that wouldn't get all the grease from underneath the fingernails. So my fingernails didn't fit my suit. So Valentine was pulling his hands in sleeves so that nobody would see my fingernails. People walking towards me, good morning, good afternoon. They thought I was some son of a diplomat or something. And I wouldn't smile and nod back. I had fun. Anyway, I tried to join the Air Force because I thought some days, maybe, I will be with Dixie in same outfit. And recruiting station happened to have been Air Force and Army joint recruiting station. And for some reason, they wouldn't take me. So I asked Dixie to find out what it's all about. Well, he made a few telephone calls and said, before you join any branch of service, you have to file a petition of becoming a citizen with immigration. So on 6th of July, I went, I think it was 6th of July, I'm not sure. Nevertheless, I filed petition with immigration to become citizen. On 8th of July, I was sworn in. They gave me a piece of paper, half a page, stencil, and said to report at Union Station military disc at 8 o'clock in the morning following day. I ran with that piece of paper to Dixie. He wasn't home. Norma Jean looked at it. She was so happy. I told her I was in the Air Force. Oh, Valentine, great. You're in the Air Force. I tell the Dixie when he gets home. So next day I was at Union Station 6 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't wait until I am in the Air Force. And when you wait for something, the time never ends. Finally, about 7:45, other guys started to show up from different recruiting stations. And when Army sergeant came out, started to call out our names, they were called for and hand out meal tickets. there were four guys in the group that I already knew from previously meeting at recruiting station. Italian, German, and I think was either Yugoslav or Polish. So I could communicate with them. So after calling our names, he handed meal tickets, put us in the coach, and bid us farewell. As trains started to move, everyone had some kind of dream. One wants to be a tank driver, the other one gunner, and my turn came around. I am in the Air Force. Not in the Air Force, you're heading to Fort Knox. What is Fort Knox? That's where the America keeps money. Army. Fort Knox, Kentucky. And sure, as what they told me, we were in Fort Knox around 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I was in the Army. Next day, I objected. They showed me a piece of paper with my signature on it, and say, "Is this your signature?" I say, "Yes." "Well, T.S., you're in the Army now. After 3 years, you can go wherever you like." Anyone doesn't know what T.S. means?
Ask Natalie.
Huh?
Yeah.
Tough poop. Yeah. So
That's awesome.
anyway,
So Valentine, tell me what so you're in the Army, and you became a.
my career nearly ended right there. You see, I had $800 with me, and I couldn't speak the language. By the way, I was a good soldier. Most Europeans are soldiers, tough soldiers. So was I. My uniforms were sharp. My bearing was sharp. When I saw a commanding officer walking in my direction, the minute I recognized him, I would start saluting. And I would keep my salute until I'm maybe 100 feet on the other side, and I look back and see if he dropped his salute, because that's when you're supposed to drop yours. And then he learned to do the same thing and smile at me. He liked me. Captain Kerr, K-E-R-R. Stocky, short, medals from here to here, World War II veterans, Battery D commander. Yeah, he might be from this area here,
Captain
with
Kirk?
name of K-E-R-R. Yeah. And, well, anyway, I also discovered there's such thing as PX, the post exchange. And I went there and I saw this tropical worsted uniform, beautiful. And I had the money. And I bought, and they tailored to fit me. And I was a very sharp soldier. And I took that uniform, I hung up in my closet, the what do you call the metal closet, yeah. And then I discovered there was a bus at company entrance, bus stop that shuttled to Louisville and back to Fort Knox. And truthfully, I did not know that I'm not supposed to be out of Fort Knox, Kentucky. I could walk anywhere on Fort Knox. I couldn't be caught outside of Fort Knox, Kentucky while I am in basic training. Maybe they have told me this before, but I didn't know that. So there was a bus. I had the money. I had good uniform. On the weekend, in orderly room, there was only one guy, usually corporal or sergeant as CQ. duty officer usually at home waiting for call if something important comes in. So there was no one else in company area who could have told me, do not do what you're trying to do. So I was in Louisville, nothing ill. I would go to diner, have my banana split, go to movie, talk to young people of my own age, catch the bus back to where I took it. Except one day I missed the bus. What do? Hitchhike. And I see headlights coming towards me. Jeep stops without top on it. 2 MPs. Where you go, GI? Fort Knox. Hop in. So I am in the Jeep. What company are you with? So I told them. They take me to company area, take me into the order room. They had some paper signed by CQ, and nothing. They didn't say nothing bad to me. I didn't say nothing good to them. So I went to the barracks, hung up my uniform nicely. Next morning, a young fellow, maybe my age, by the name of Koepp, K-O-P-P, K-O-E-P-P. I don't know his first name. He was a Lance Corporal. Lance Corporal means that he was recruit just like I was, except that he was wearing an armband with corporal stripes. In other words, he was acting corporal, but wasn't getting paid as a corporal. In other words, he was NCO, non-commissioned officer, believing. And he was the only guy, aside of Captain Kerr, by the way, eventually, who really could understand me. I could communicate with them. And by the way, when I ended basic training, Captain Kerr was on good terms with me. And the reason was, I tell you, he tells me, Valentine, you're in deep poo-poo. And I ask him, why? Well, you went to Louisville. You're not supposed to have gone to Louisville. You're not supposed to get out of Fort Knox. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, he said, you tell the first sergeant and Captain Kerr, because first sergeant wants to see you in orderly room. So I go to orderly room. Sergeant Baker, 6'3" or 6'2", with size 12 boots, says, Valentine, you ever reported, Hampton, not Hampton, Kushnir. Have you ever reported to commanding officer? I said, no. Well, he said, when you go in to see Captain Kerr, you salute, you say, sir, Private Kushnir reporting as ordered, sir. And you hold your salute until he salutes you and drops his salute. Then he will tell you a reach, then you put your hands behind your back, spread your leg, and listen what he has to say. And he says, you think you can hack it? I say, well, I don't know. Well, he said, go to the bathroom and look in the mirror and salute yourself until you get it. So I go to the bathroom, 5 or maybe 10 minutes, saluting myself. And then I walk out. He said, you think you can do it? He said, I think I can. So he opens that door. Captain Kerr had big executive disc. Only one book on that disc. In front of him, he was listening through. And I saluted him, reported. He's listening through book, not even looking up at me, not saluting, nothing. And that was a few minutes. And then he looks up to me, he salutes, no smile, nothing. He's very serious look in his eyes. And then he drops his salute, it is private. I put myself on at ease, and he starts to talk to me. Well, by that time, my heart rate was double normal. I could see my shirt going this, yeah, because I knew I did something wrong. Kerb told me, and I didn't know how serious. And anyway, Captain Kerr started to talk to me, and then he stops. And I knew I had to say something because it was my turn. And the only two words I knew perfectly was yes, sir, and no, sir. Yeah. The three words, right? Yeah. And he stops, and I thought to myself, what should I say? I didn't get one. His vocabulary was way over my head to begin with. Yeah. Besides, I was so excited, I couldn't understand a word what he was telling me. And so I said, no, sir. He looks at me like that, and he started to talk to me again, little louder and little faster. And he stops again. I knew it was my turn. Yes, sir. And then he starts louder and faster. The third time he stopped, I said something, I know, not right, because he picks up this book. It was purple. I found out later on it was Manual of Court-Martial Offenses. Yeah. Anyway, he started to come around his desk. Sergeant Baker, I found out later on that Captain Kerr was set up by Sergeant Baker. They were playing jokes with with Captain Kerr. He knew, Sergeant Baker knew I don't speak the language. Captain Kerr did not. So when Sergeant Baker reached out, I was only 130 pounds then. I was this wide and this small, yeah, and nothing but muscles. I used to lift weights, yeah. And Sergeant Baker literally lifts me out of the floor, turns around, and shoves me towards the door. And there's 4 steps coming down from barracks. I nearly lost my footing. I caught myself. But to boot with, he gave me a boot, size 12. Yeah. And he says, I will see you later. And then apparently he told Captain Kerr what it was all about. And eventually Captain Kerr forgot all of that and became a very good friend of mine. Until I think the last 2 weeks of basic training, he started to dislike me. I was transferred to, I was not graduated from basic training. I was transferred to different battery or company. And I had to go through infiltration course twice, in addition to one that at the end of our basic training, we had what is called infiltration course. You all know what is infiltration course? It's barbed wire on a post strung up on top, crisscrossed between the firing line in the pits and the targets, about yay high. On firing line, there are machine guns that are secured permanently to where they are not move, elevation and laterally. And to go to infiltration course, you have to crawl under the wire, clear the entire length of the firing area, and when you get to a pitch, they stop firing, you crawl into a pit, and then they march you to where you started. And they put you in different parts from where you, in other words, there's a group that hasn't gone through, there's a group that has gone through. Well, I was not initiated of that particular incident, but there were guys who convinced me that I should go along with them. They say, why don't we walk 3-4 ranges, walk into the pits, walk through the pits until where we have to be
They were
there.
trying to cheat.
Yeah. And walk with group that finished course back to where we started, or we should have started. So I did. Well,
Bad decision.
but you know, I was smart. I stayed in background where nobody could see me. The battalion commander and company commander were there. Sergeant Becker were there. It was night. Company and the battalion commander were under tent where they, it was drizzling, by the way, mud, under the tent where they had coffee and light. And I was out of light way back. And Sergeant Becker, he noticed that there were 4 other guys, clean uniforms in the group that all have mud all over
But
them.
you're not with those guys.
No, I was in the
You're
back, yeah. And they told Sergeant Becker that there's another guy was with us. So I was transferred twice from company I was supposed to have graduated to different company that was going through infiltration course, and then to one more company. So the company that was in I had to go through, plus 2 more companies, 3 infiltration courses
to get it done.
before I was sent to Fort Raleigh, Kansas. I arrived in Fort Raleigh, Kansas, as I was assigned to 1st 519th Intelligence Service Platoon, and then the platoon was redesignated 520th Intelligence Service Platoon. 32 enlisted men and 2 officers and 1 enlisted man, American citizens. The rest of us was like myself. Platoon could handle nearly every language in the world except Swahili and English.
So Valentine, tell me, because I know you're fixing to begin your entire vast career as a soldier. And, you know, we need to do this again.
Yeah, sure.
And so the story that I want you to get to is when you began to long for your family and you began to realize that the internet is powerful and you began to do some research.
Yes. To begin with, I began to, I would say, literally cry for my family. Because when we were taken to Würzburg, we were better off, much better off than the rest of my family back home. We had clean beds, good food, people treated us nice, and everything that my family didn't have. And I was feeling guilty for having so good and they have so bad. And I literally cried. Then, when I was on active duty, hearing story that my village was one of the 14 villages burned and everyone got shot, when I accepted the fact that my family no longer alive, and I couldn't find my father alive, I was an orphan. My entire Army career, I was in highly classified assignments. I was attached to the Air Force from November 1962 until I think it was May 1965, 65, as a test pilot. I was with Foreign Technology Division of Air Force, specifically acquisition and exploitation of foreign equipment. By that time, by the way, I spoke English. I had my high school, and I had lots of college credits. And I was with unit that was responsible for acquisition and exploitation of foreign equipment, which meant buy, steal, or borrow piece of foreign equipment, try to find out everything that need to be found out, maybe a certain part of the aircraft or helicopter or what, characteristics and that, maybe a certain type of metal or something that was needed. And then dispose of piece of equipment, whatever means necessary. So I was with that part of Air Force, attached to that part of Air Force branch. From there, I was sent to Germany, was assigned to 519th Intelligence Group. At one time, I was with platoon with 32 enlisted men and 3 officers. That was in 1945. Now it was a group. I was assigned to that group aviation section. They had 1 fixed-wing aircraft and 1 helicopter, 2 fixed-wing, 1 twin-engine, 1 single-engine, and 1 helicopter that I was flying. In addition, I had to continue work that was left over from what I was doing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with the Air Force.
Is that when you started researching the tire company? Is that when you started researching your town?
No. I could not. I was not even trying. I'm just telling you the reason why I knew that village was burned. I knew that everyone was killed. I couldn't find my father, so he must be killed. I accepted as an orphan. The only interest I had may to find if there were any other relatives that might have remained alive, because we had relatives in other villages too, on both sides. However, that was not so important to me. To me, it was here and now. In other words, I am highly classified. If I was trying to find out something, what was going on in the Soviet Union outside of my own area of work, I wouldn't be in my area of work. You understand what I'm talking about? Yes. Okay. When Soviet Union fell apart, my curiosity reappeared again. I was no longer interested in my family. I was interested what happened to the village, what's village now like? Are there any survivors? So I tried to go through official channels. No response. And I think I know why. There are Ploska, Ploske, and Plosko in 3 different locations. So could have been anything that they were looking at. They couldn't find nothing. So they didn't say nothing. And then we were living in Del Rio at that time, I was 2 o'clock in the morning,
What time is it? I mean, what year is it?
1987, October 26th.
Okay.
It was 2 o'clock in the morning, browsing internet, daytime in Ukraine, looking for some place on the internet that is close to
Is it 87 or 97?
97. Did I say 87?
Yeah.
No,
it's
90,
1997.
I'm sorry, 97, yeah. Comes with the old age, by the way. Yeah. And so I was browsing this internet and came across a website advertising sugar for sale. And their email address was only 40 kilometers from village that I left back home. So I thought, I tried everything else, might as well send email to this particular email, not knowing the name or anything, asking them to find out whatever they can about family Kushnirs and the village of Ploska. And let me know if they find out something. Thinking no more than what was then, I went to sleep. I think it was 4 o'clock in the morning, telephone rang.
Yes, it was 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Misha Mission from city of Rovno. Valentine, this is Misha Mission. I have some good news for you. Your brother and sisters are alive. Your brother has telephone, but it doesn't work. But he will try to get in touch with you somehow. My world went upside down.
Is that amazing?
That was
3 days later, I am waiting for that call from my brother. I think it was 3rd of January, 3rd of January, or 3rd of November. I ran out of patience. I called Misha Mission's office, and his secretary says, Misha is out for lunch, call back in 1 hour. I hung up telephone. Just a few minutes later, my brother was in his office. My brother, the telephone rings, I pick up telephone. My brother Leon, Valentine, where have you been 55 years?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Is that mind blowing? 55 years.
yeah. And next year, 88, no, 98, I'm sorry, 98, not 88. I went to Ukraine. I saw my sisters, my brother, and 100 relatives I didn't know I had. Most of them couldn't add, but they could multiply.
So,
And then we started to send packages through Canadian company to Ukraine,
yes.
$300 and $600 shipments, and then I discovered that they were getting every second or third one, and then I quit that. Then I went to Ukraine in person in '98, and I spent a month. As I said, I have seen everybody, and my brother died. My younger sister died, so there's only two of us. Hala, I just talked to her a few days ago before coming up here.
Natalie and I
Yeah.
met her. When we were together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked to her on Skype. Yeah.
But is this just like blow your mind? So that,
Yeah.
yeah, and so what year did your mother pass away?
My mother? My mother, let me tell you about this. In 1944, when the Soviets reoccupied part of Ukraine, they pushed Germans back. Someone in the village told Soviet authorities that my brother was in underground. At that time, my brother was conscripted into Soviet army 2 days after they reoccupied the territory. They put him in Soviet army and sent him on the front lines fighting Germans. When I was captured by Graz, my brother, when I saw him, he told me he was on the east side of Graz fighting Germans. At that time, when I was captured and was interrogated, I was wondering why they wanted to shoot me and accusing me of, I didn't know Russians were there. I was wondering why they was going to shoot me as a Soviet infiltrator. Yeah, but I found out from my brother the reason, because he was fighting with Soviets against Germans on the other side.
So your mother had her husband and her 2 sons.
My father, I couldn't find him in Germany. I found out about my father that he was forcibly repatriated to Soviet Union from Duisburg, through that camp where I was nearly caught. He might have been at that time when I was escaping from there and shooting Walter 632. He may have, because I do not know when he was there, but my brother told me that he was forcibly repatriated from British zone, and that was the only camp in British zone where the Soviets were getting people together to take back the Soviet Union. So it's just everything, yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank
So
you.
everyone,
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you can talk and visit, and
Any questions?
yeah, you just do it. Say whatever.
Do you know what happened to your dad? Do you know what happened to your dad after that?
Second?
Do you know what happened to your father after he was forcibly repatriated?
Well, I just said he was forcibly, he was repatriated and he was put in Soviet army. He was sent to fight Japanese.
Wow.
And he didn't come home until 1948. And my brother, he was in Soviet army. He came home in 1957, I think.
So he found your mom and family?
Well, talking about my mom, when the Soviets found out that, or when they were told that my brother was in underground, they put my mama and 2 little girls, 10 and 9, I think it was at that time, into a boxcar in winter, severe winter, no heat. They were put with other people to be repatriated into Kazakhstan or taken to Kazakhstan. And eventually the Soviets, before train departed, the Soviets found out that my brother was in Soviet army. So they let my mother go. My aunt went to pick up my mother and 2 little girls, brought my mother home. My mother was sick with pneumonia at that time. And in the house we had what they call hearths, where you bake bread. On top is real nice and warm when it's heat in the hearth. And so my aunt put my mama on top, made soup for her, and next day my mother was dead. 2 little sisters were picked up by neighbors. They were neighbors that were not very kind to them. And from one neighbor to the next, when my father came back in 48, he remarried, and their new mama was not very kind to them. So at very young age, both of them went on their own. They went to Kharkov and to the east of Dnieper River, and were looking for work. My youngest sister, when she came home, when she came to us, you probably, you have seen her, you met? She was walking like this. You know why? Because that's what she was doing all her life, sweeping street. Yeah. So that's what she was doing all her life. Yeah. And well, both of them had kids. One of her youngsters, he is a traitor. He is a traitor. I would kill him. He is in Moscow. He is with ISIS. Yeah.
It's very bad.
What do you think about the United States?
Say again, please.
What do you think about the United States political situation right now?
Right now?
Right now.
What is there to think about? You just wait for a situation to develop next minute. What comes? It's different country from what I had known.
Amen.
When I came to this country, when I joined the army, I have given pledge that I will serve the country. And by the way, I have been in units where loyalty was demanded not to the country, not to the flag, but to individual that you serving for, your immediate supervisor. And I didn't like that. And although I retired as CW4, Chief Warrant Officer 4, that's the highest grade that you could attain in those days. Right now they have 5, they're talking about 6. Chief Warrant Officer 6. But at that time, 4, it's the highest grade that you can get to. And that's the grade that I retired, despite the fact that not my entire military career was milk and honey. I had to, well, here.
And he does have all of his, like, there's photos, there's everywhere.
I've been released from active duty when after 4 years of service as enlisted man. And that was in 1953. In 1960, I was stationed at Fort Belvoir, Virginia as Warrant Officer 2 with 3rd Helicopter Company. That was the backup for Presidential Flood Detachment and also a military district of Washington. And in 1962, I was asked by unit commander if I would consider to be voluntarily released from active duty. I didn't know why. He wouldn't tell me. He just asked me to be released, request release from active duty, voluntarily. Given me 2 weeks. And that's not very much time, because I didn't know where to go, didn't have a job or anything. And so I refused, because the only thing I knew that my job as a pilot and career, because I had highest efficiency reports every place I've been up to that point. And I asked him if I did anything wrong. He says, no, nothing, absolutely nothing. We just want you to request release from active duty voluntarily. I refused. So I think it was a few days later. Normally duty in that particular company was sitting on 2nd floor in at the table playing pinochle. Alarm would ring. All of us have to run downstairs, run to your assigned aircraft, jump into your assigned aircraft with pilot and co-pilot, crew chief, and immediately take off. Not waiting for anyone else, because there might be aircraft that they find some problem. So the third aircraft and other aircraft have to go. That is, ring is alert, red alert. And so we're taking off. And we have to fly certain, it used to be called idiot circuit. In other words, you fly from one IP point to the next IP point, you report there, they tell you where to go next. And you take your flight plan in flight by radio. And then they tell you, you can go home. So you land again and you go back to play pinochle. So one day, bell rings, all of us run to our helicopters. I run down and I see my aircraft that is already taking off. 2 guys in it. And the next one, and the next one. All of the aircrafts have 2 people in cockpit. I stayed there on the ramp, dumbfounded, and I knew something was going on. When all came back, Major comes to me with a piece of paper. He says, Valentine, sign here, or court-martial. We're going to get you out one way or the other. You missed flight. And that is a serious offense. Yeah? So Valentine signs that piece of paper and no job. They're giving me 2 weeks. And the only guy I knew on the outside of military who was in flying business was by the name of Skug. He is the guy who organized petroleum helicopters on Grand Isle, Louisiana. At that time, he had only 2 helicopters, and he was working with 2 helicopters in the Gulf with oil rigs, and
Have you already been flying helicopters at this time?
second,
Are you flying helicopters yet, or are you just flying planes?
only helicopters.
So when the planes those guys took off, those were all helicopters.
Yeah, all of the helicopters, H-21 bananas.
Okay.
They're not making them anymore. They quit making them in maybe early 60s. Yeah.
How old were you at that point?
Say again, please.
How old were you at that?
Well, figure out, 1926, 1962.
He keeps doing that. I have to do the math in